Hey guys, Red02 here. I just realized this past weekend that Haspin is under a month, well, about a month and a week away, and I'm nowhere ready. The Haspin build has the rear axle torn out of it because we're going to pull it apart, put new fluids in it, and make sure everything's okay. It's really hot in the garage, so I'm just gonna get to work. I gotta get the mud mower, the mud Dynamark, and the Haspin build done. And then I gotta go ahead and start working on getting my cap all furnished and everything. Go through my checklist, but it's very hot in the garage, so before I get all sweaty and dirty, I'm gonna shoot this and then we'll start filming, working on some stuff. Here's the 820 out of the Haspin build. The gear oil has some speckles in it, but there's no large chunks of metal or anything, so it seems like the axle and gears are wearing in pretty good. Big shout out to Rom's Peerless Parts. That's not the correct name, but I'll post a link down in the description. He's the one that sells the 820 gear sets. And the gears are holding up pretty darn good. No big chips out of them. No, the wear pattern's good on them. So big shout out to him. And everything else looks pretty good. I was worried about my reverse chain upgrade, but it seems like the master link's holding up good. So we'll clean everything back up, put some fresh grease in it, some fresh oil, and then we'll put it back together and slap it back in the tractor. Bottom half of the case full of brand new gear oil, sealed around the edges with some RTV. I had to apply it by finger because the tube was clogged up. It all hardened up. And then some grease in the axles, and we'll put it back together, snug down the bolts, and then wait an hour or so, and then we'll torque down the bolts. As you can see, the Haspin build is still in shambles, but we're making some leeway. The rear axle is all back together, fresh fluids. I made sure everything was wearing in good, and it is. So I just got to put the ball and spring back in the shifter plate area there, and then I can slap that back up into the tractor. Now, last year for the build off, I said that this has heads on it with dual valve springs, blah blah blah. Well, turns out I made a mistake. I guess for Haspin last year, I put the motor together, I put the intake and the dual barrel carb on it, and it ran, so I ran out of time, so I did not put my heads on. And I guess after Haspin, I completely forgot about them because that's my Vanguard parts drawer is way down there, and all this stuff has been there, and I guess I forgot to put my heads on. And I always thought that the motor sounded funny, like there was something wrong with it, but it ran and it did rip, so I just let it go. A couple months ago I was looking for some Vanguard parts, and I noticed that my racing heads were in that drawer. Now, I just got done putting this motor back together. Turns out my racing heads were not racing heads. They were just stock heads with dual valve springs in them. So these were my supposed racing heads, but there's no porting or anything. Man, this was back whenever I was, I don't know, 15, 16, so I didn't really know much about any of this. So I just got done putting the motor back together. I actually put the dual valve springs onto those heads because the rocker arms were a lot more robust than the ones that go to these heads. So now the Haspin build has its dual barrel carb, its ported intake manifold, and then it now has dual valve springs, and I actually took out the flywheel key, lapped the flywheel, and put the flywheel and cocked it, advanced the timing about 1/3 of the keyway. So If you guys thought that the Haspin build ripped beforehand, it's a whole new motor now. I have no more valve float. It revs a lot quicker, it sounds a lot meaner, so you're gonna have to wait until Haspin to hear it, but